This is recording. Okay, so I'm doing my presentation over Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar was born in July 12th of 100 BC, and Julius Caesar is more known commonly from the Shakespeare play written about him, where he is eventually murdered. I'm struggling over my words. Brutally murdered by Cassius and Brutus. Some of his closest friends, because of the actions that he had done throughout his time in the empire. Some interesting facts about him is he was crowned emperor actually 3 times. He was crowned in 49 BC, but he resigned within 10 days of taking office. He was crowned once again in 48 BC for an indefinite amount of time, and then he was crowned again in 46 BC, which was only 2 years before his death. So, as I said, from the Shakespeare play, Julius Caesar, he is stabbed, I believe it was around 20 times. I don't remember the exact number. It's been a few years since I was in high school and did that play. But he was stabbed 21 times, I believe, and it was by his closest friends, other senators, and people within the Roman Senate, because they believed he was unfit to rule at that time. He had done many different actions. He had seemed more like a dictator than he had seemed more democratic, which they did not want. They did not want a dictator ruling Rome. Rome was not one of those people. It copied many of Greece's democratic features. It copied some of the things from Greece, such as gods, architecture, art style, military style, and as we can see here, most Roman rulers were, as the United States has it, the commander of the army, the commander-in-chief. And through a couple of these pictures, like in this one right here, you can see him wearing the laurel wreath around his head, which you will see in many Roman emperors' paintings, sculptures, figures. It was just a symbol of power and a symbol of peace later on in life, but they wore it as a symbol of power. You can see him here holding what looks to be a sword or a spear in his hand. That's very common during that time. The Roman Empire, or Roman emperor, when in battle, was usually wielding a sword. They weren't in the front line. They were more in the back, protecting, giving commands, being protected by auxiliary forces or praetorians. And throughout history, we've tried to recreate or reconstruct Julius Caesar, and that's what this picture right here is for. I'm going to move this so you can see it better. This is him in his old age. He's presented with a broad forehead. He's presented with receding hairlines, possibly from stress. But Julius Caesar is most known culturally for expanding the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire was a massive undertaking in itself when you look at it. It conquered Greece. It conquered many of the Greek territories that Alexander the Great had conquered. It conquered Greece, the Middle East, Egypt, Jerusalem, all around the Mediterranean. It basically, once it took over Greece, it became the next prominent power. It became the next prominent thing for the Roman Empire, in the Mediterranean. And the Roman Empire began its rule in a very young period, right after the Greeks fell, so shortly after the Peloponnesian War, I want to say. And then it went all the way up until the Holy Roman Empire, until Charlemagne's sons ultimately ended the Holy Roman Empire by infighting. Julius Caesar expanded the territory not only in the Mediterranean, but he expanded it northwards as well. He went into Gaul. He established modern-day Europe, modern-day France, and he expanded a lot of the power, the influences. He brought in a lot of different cultures. He brought in the Germanic tribes. He brought in the people of Gaul. He sent expeditionary forces to Great Britain, at that time just known as Britain, or Britannia. He conquered a lot of the Middle East. You can see ancient Roman art or pictures where they are riding elephants, which you wouldn't see unless you went Middle East / Africa area, around that peninsula. I want to say about around the Red Sea. And I mean, just looking at the man, you can tell that he had grown into his 50s. I have it written here. He grew to the age of 56 before he was brutally murdered by Cassius and Brutus and a couple other conspirators, who then were hunted down by loyalists. This right here is another picture of him. This is more of him in his later years, when he's in his military attire, but you can tell by the hair, it looks a little more curly, it looks more aged, his hairline is receding, he's not shown as like he is in here, like a godlike figure. He's not built, they don't show non-receding features. Here you can see that the Roman architecture, and that's another thing that he brought in, or was part of the Roman Empire, was the amount of detail they put into their sculptures. So you can see that they don't show him as a godlike figure, they show him as an actual person, which is something that you don't see a lot compared to other cultures. I have a quote up here that says, "I've lived long enough both in years and accomplishments." So by the time Julius Caesar reached his age of 56, that was an older age in that time period. You usually didn't live to the age of 56. He had done many accomplishments, and he was proud of them. He didn't realize he was becoming a dictator, and by the end of his reign, he had, as I said, pushed north. He expanded the Roman culture, their borders. He brought in various cultures. They weren't the type of people to just expel other cultures. They would absorb them and see what they could bring to the empire. And from that, you could see things such as the Greek gods. They absorbed those. The Etruscan architecture, they absorbed that. They put that into their building style. They used many of the same things that you would see around the Mediterranean Peninsula, building styles, architecture, art styles. They still used pottery. They still used many of the pottery techniques that the Greeks used, that they learned from the islands of Crete, the islands of Delphi, or the oracles of Delphi. They believed in the same things that the Greeks did. They absorbed different people's cultures. And then for my art project, which I'm going to show off, is this. This is a sign that you may see when you're going to Rome from, let's say, like a tavern or at a crossroads. Because Rome was also very advanced architecturally. They built concrete roads that we still don't fully understand how they're still working. So I painted this, and it's still drying a little bit. I put a new coat on it today. This would be about 237 miles out. So you could say coming from the east. So coming from the east part of the Mediterranean Peninsula, you would have places like Rome marked. You'd have places like Rome, Sicily, Athens, Corinth, Alexandria, Thebes, just massive cities. They were very good architecturally. As I said, they understood navigation. They weren't the best at naval warfare, but they could hold their own. They weren't like the Athenians, but nobody was like the Athenians back then. You could hold your own time. You could hold your own power, and through their military accomplishments, and that's another thing he was good at. He conquered so many territories that his techniques and his strategies were unparalleled during that time. And by the time he was murdered, he was crowned as one of the greatest political figures and influential figures in history. Thank you for listening.